become something that, because it feels like it was almost something in the past that if you displayed that, even if when you had pride marches, by having the flag, you're walking down with the flag, and people will be giving you abuse for having the flag. So all of a sudden, I guess that's more my point in terms of
right.
It's
an interesting point. Yeah. It is, and actually, I remember. I mean, it is an interesting point. But I think one of the things that sticks in my mind, probably slightly relevant, but when we did a Proudly Whites thing at North London Derby. So this is old stadium at White Hart Lane, when they knocked down. They had Tottenham Square, which is they knocked down something outside, and not the petrol station. It was on the other side, but there was a bit of a thing there, and we were giving out sweets because we were just trying to build awareness of what we were doing. So we're just giving out leaflets and sweets and stickers and stuff like that. Yeah. And kids were taking them because, they're rainbows and they love rainbows, right? So kids are just taking sweets and stickers. They don't know what they're looking at. But you're kind of quite right, which is it is a ubiquitous image, and is associated one thing. And if it's associated with something, does it then become confusing? And then what happens in 6 months' time when the message has moved on and that campaign has been forgotten about? Who knows? I don't know. I think I'm kind of slightly more. I'm personally more relaxed about it because there is a distinction between a rainbow and a pride flag. But of course, I understand the point you're making, which is that other people aren't necessarily distinguishing between the two. So I guess time will tell where that takes us.
Yeah, it will. Okay. Is that all you wanted to really cover on the Pride there, Simon?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as I said, we're just doing something nice for our members. So if people just keep a lookout on our social or on Proudly White's social media channels on Instagram and Twitter. So Proudly Whites on Instagram, and I think it's at Spurs LGBT on Twitter. You should see some fun stuff and some familiar faces over the weekend supporting us, which is lovely.
Brilliant. Excellent. That sounds really good. Good. So, Steve, you had something to say about VAR.
Well, I wanted to no one's spoken about VAR. I don't feel that it's been in the before lockdown and at the beginning, from the beginning of the season till when we had to stop football, VAR was never out of the headlines. It was always being spoken about. It was always being center, front and center of every bit of football focus that there was. But it seems to have, it doesn't seem to be so much, monopolizing the attention there. And there have been a few sort of VAR incidents, I think, that where there's been decisions given, but why is no one talking? Why all of a sudden is no one talking about it? Is that because is it because there's no fans there to get irate about things? It's just, I don't know. Are they? It kind of shows that the media try and build up something, because they're no longer making a big deal out of it, and because there's no, fans are not there, and there's other things to look at, and for a lot of fans, they've already said that that this isn't their primary focus now. Football may not be their primary focus, and all of a sudden we're not talking. I don't know. I think it's amazing that there's been however many games, 11 games, probably a few contentious decisions, and yet still no real mention of VAR.
I know, because if you looked at the Villa Sheffield United game, when the ball went over the line, and the watch didn't work, Hawkeye didn't work. VAR should have overridden it, but for some reason that was just completely ignored.
And they mentioned a little bit. Sorry, go on, Simon.
Yeah, no. So I was just going to chime in and say. So I read that the VAR protocols are separate to the goal line technology protocols. So VAR can't overrule. Because the whole point of VAR is about clear and obvious errors being made by the referee.
Yeah. But though. You can't get much more clear and obvious than the ball.
No, I know. But the protocol. But this is my understanding. So maybe I'm not reading something correctly. But the VAR protocols don't permit it to overrule goal line technology.
Yeah, which is fair enough. But of course, football fans think protocol? What's that got to do with it? The ball went over the line. Why didn't you sort it out?
But this is when, but that's because,
sense, isn't it?
Absolutely, but this is when you put in, you kind of put in legislation to overrule these things, and therefore everyone just sits back and relies on it. So, what do you do? And the fact there's no retrospective to then say, oh, we got it wrong, they should have been awarded the goal, here's the goal.
Yeah, that's right.
And they did apologise, didn't they? And I'd like them just to really come out and say, look, we forgot to turn it on, because it's never failed up to now. They've got 7 cameras or whatever showing that they had no camera. Yeah. They had no camera at all. They had no camera angle to show the ball. When they show it over the line or show where the ball might be to show that there's an error or anything. They did nothing. They showed nothing. There's no coverage, no nothing to say, look, this is the line. This is where the ball is. Not a single thing. They didn't have it on. They forgot to turn it on. You know what I mean? Because wasn't it the first game back? It was the very first game.
It was the very first half.
First half of the first game back, they forgot to turn it on. They should just come out and say, look, we forgot to turn it on. Apologies.
Do you think that's what happened?
They check the game, but they check it before.
Yeah,
they
must check it. Yeah.
So but if you were a chef, if that was okay, so if that's your team or it were our team, wouldn't you want? What where's the
justice?
Where's the justice? It's like, okay.
But then, of course, we've all lived through the Mendes goal at Man United that never was. And we can never forget that, can we? That was just an abomination.
There can be no justice, even if they apologise and say, look, we fucked up. There's no justice for Sheffield United. They didn't win that game, and they went on to lose the following game. And this is the thing about setting yourself up. So Spurs didn't want to lose to Man United, and that will hopefully set them up for the West Ham game. Sheffield United were probably expecting to beat Villa. Probably, in their mind, they were probably expecting, in terms of where they were in the league and the form and everything that they were on, and in terms of targeting points or whatever, they probably thought, right, well, we should be beating Villa and on the balance of play, and we've so it kind of changes your mindset. They ended up getting a player sent off, the next game.
They did.
So they've had two games, and I think one of those was the first decision was a real dodgy booking, wasn't it? It was I
don't know.
Just a nothing decision for a booking, and then he ends up bringing someone down, which was a yellow card, and therefore it was 2 yellow cards, and he was off. But the first one was just a handbags where they were sort of, deciding about who was going to hold the ball, from between one team and another, and both players got booked. So they're probably thinking, why would we come back? Why have they brought football back?
Well, I've been thinking the same thing, actually, but there we go.
We've missed all this, haven't we?
We have. We've missed all this.
Does that segue nicely into your next point then, Andy, about Leagues 1 and 2?
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm finding it quite hard to engage with this Project Restart and the way that it's being brought back. But I think not just because it's behind closed doors, but just because it's being brought back. And like the rest of it, like everybody, I do want football back, but not necessarily in this guise. And earlier this evening, I was watching the Exeter Colchester League 2 playoff, and that was great to watch. It's probably not the quality of football that we're used to normally, but it's professional football, and some of these clubs are potentially going to go to the wall if they don't get their gate receipts back. And we're complaining about defences, players, managers, VAR in the Premier League, and this is fairly inconsequential to the history of clubs that are 100 years old that could go into administration and may not be able to come back from the brink because the debts are just too big and they won't be able to get buyers to take them, and there might be a lot of them all in one go. So I just feel that there is a really kind of dark period ahead for those lower league teams.
So is that different then? So Project Restart as a thing versus those lower league clubs having their own restart. Which is it that you're kind of uncomfortable with? Because it feels like they're two sides of the same coin, if you like.
Well, they are in a way, but the problem is that the Premier League can afford to come back, or has to come back, by hook or by crook, because the money's just too big. The League One and League Two teams can't come back because they furloughed their players, and as soon as they come back, they'd have to go through lots of testing trials, which would cost them hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Right.
And that would obviously cost them more than they're actually getting through revenue, because their revenue is mostly gate receipts.
I think the issue, as you say, is the Premier League, in terms of the money that they generate or that they receive from payments and stuff, their product goes around the world. So as long as they're playing, they're generating income, and the clubs will get the income they need. Obviously, the Premier League clubs and Championship clubs or whatever are no different to League One and League Two in terms of wanting and requiring revenue to stay afloat.
Indeed,
totally. But they've got an easier means of generating that income, which is unfair. It is unfair. But in terms of the quality of football, or product that they're putting out, that's obviously the reason that they're getting more money. If in the current situation, League One and League Two can't afford to play because they can't afford to travel. They can't afford to travel. They can't afford to travel. They can't afford to host. The TV deals that they've got just don't.
Well, they can't take their players off furlough. I do agree in terms of the fact that it's unfair on these lower division teams, in terms of the fact that the Premier League and Championship are coming back as if there's no issue or whatever. But I feel guilty from that side. But I absolutely love football, So I unlike you, I'm enjoying watching the games. I've watched virtually every game. I mean, there are things. I was talking to a guy that I coach with. Sorry, Simon. Let me just finish on this point.
Yeah, sure.
Talking to a guy that I coach with earlier, just about football.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "What do you think about the football that's back?" And I said, "Well, I'm quite enjoying it. It's a bit odd. The problems that I see with this is that they're doing things half-hearted in terms of trying to pretend that they are taking safety measures.
Totally.
Some people have got masks on. Sometimes they'll throw a new ball in. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes someone will hug. Sometimes they will.
Absolutely.
They'll slap hands and all that. Just be honest and say, look, we're gonna do whatever we do. We're gonna play football like we normally. I've seen people, spitting, snotting, all sorts of stuff that they normally do, right? Yeah. But they just afterwards, and as you say, they're in a position to test and to do their testing and tracking that no one else can do. So just be honest and say, look, we don't need to necessarily take the precautions that everyone else does, because we can, in the environment we're in, it's close contact. It is close contact. That's a part and parcel of football. We know that it's close contact, but by the same token, we're going to be testing really regularly, every 2 or 3 days, and therefore we can spot at the earliest possible opportunity if there is a problem.
Absolutely.
So that for me is the only thing that I would say is the downside, is that they're giving this pretense that actually they're paying heed to the safety measures, when
totally
in reality,
agree.
it's just touching the surface. Yeah. Sorry, Simon, you were going to say?
No. I think what we've kind of talked about here is almost like it's another filter through what we're seeing across the whole of society. So the bigger companies and organisations have been, who are desperate to reopen their doors to have customers come back in and shop or do whatever they want. May find it easier to get back up onto it, or they found other ways to make revenue because they're using, delivering apps or whatever it might well be. I'm just picking things up here.
Yeah.
But then the smaller individual community-based retailers are